What's up, guys? I'm back with another episode of LBO's podcast, Growing Pains. I'm here with Paul Noris, the CEO of Bank of Central Florida. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. Good to see you.
I'm so excited to have you today because I'm very excited for the audience, for everyone watching and listening to hear the story of Bank of Central Florida, the passion that you guys have for the city and just for the people that work there in particular too. And businesses here need resources, right? And many business owners need those sort of stepping stones and resources to understand to take those next steps. So I'm excited just to dive into this and to hear your story too. So
yeah, no, I appreciate it. We've been part of the community now for 15 years, and I'm very excited for the story of Bank of Central Florida to get heard. So that's great.
So before we dive into Bank of Central Florida itself, why don't we learn a little bit about you personally? You are from Lakeland, correct?
No, actually, I was born over on the East Coast, just outside of Melbourne.
Okay.
And married to my wife, Lynn, for 32 years. Have two daughters, Kelsey and Delaney, 28 and 26. They are both living their life, one up in Georgia, the other up in North Carolina. So they're doing great. Lynn and I moved to Lakeland back in 1996.
Okay. Awesome.
So Lynn grew up in Brandon. And so we had an opportunity with SunTrust at the time to move to Lakeland, and came over and fell in love with the city and never left.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot has changed since then.
Oh, yes. No question about it.
So what gravitated you to come to Lakeland then? And before we kind of talk about, what you did here when you did move, what resonated here in the city was...
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. So I had I worked at SunTrust. So I was working for a big company, and you get that phone call one day from my boss's boss. And you never want to hear from your boss's boss. And
usually
she asked, usually not. That's usually not a good thing. But she asked me to come up and visit with her, and asked me to move my family over here. And at the time, my daughter Kelsey was about I guess right at a year old, and Lynn was pregnant with our second baby. So kind of a weird time to think about making a move. But when we came over and checked out Lakeland, it really reminded me of Melbourne, where I grew up. I grew up on the beach just outside of Melbourne, but it was that kind of community where you sort of could get your lay of the land. Back in the mid 90s, downtown was not what it is today. Quite honestly, Lakeland was nowhere what it is today. But when I came and met the people and began to get sort of connected around town, it really did. It reminded me of where I grew up, where you ran into people you knew, and you knew how to make connections. And it was a city back then that, you could really get a sense of the community that was here. A lot of that goes back to the public's legacy and Mr. Sykes and others in the who were kind of the forefathers of our community. And they really did a great job of instilling a sense of community here. So pretty quickly, Lynn and I dove in. Got really involved in a lot of different things, and was really blessed that SunTrust supported all that. And so it was a great place to raise our kids. I used to tell my daughters when they were in high school not to do anything wrong, because the chances are I'd know about it before they got home. So, but it was awesome. We loved raising our family here.
That's amazing. So you're at SunTrust. Talk us through the timeline of how you went from SunTrust and then starting Bank of Central Florida. How long were you at SunTrust here in Lakeland, and what kind of sparked that idea or just that inspiration to go out on your own and create something amazing?
Yeah, so it is an interesting story. So I was at SunTrust for 17 years, and I spent the last
96 to
96, and then I left there in 2005.
Okay.
So was here about 9 years here, and then the balance was some in Orlando and then some up in Gainesville. And so we're really enjoyed being an employee there, really enjoyed helping them grow that bank. But at some point, one of my good friends, Wesley Beck, who's a developer here in town and entrepreneur really here in town, I was his banker, and he kept prodding me saying, "Man, you gotta get out of the banking business. You got to do something different." And so I went to work with Wesley, doing some real estate development and doing some different things, and got a phone call one day from a guy by the name of David Henderson. And David asked whether Wesley and I would have any interest in going and grabbing some lunch, because he was thinking about starting a bank and wanted to know whether we wanted to invest. And so we went and met with him, and we're headed back to the office after the lunch. And Wesley said, "What do you think?" And I said, "No." I said, I don't think starting a bank makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of good banks in town. I'm just not sure it's the right time to do that. And then unfortunately,
like the normal reactions that you're like, come on, that's like unrealistic.
Unrealistic. I mean, it's, you think about being an entrepreneur, and starting a bank it's a very regulated industry. There is a lot of moving parts. So, I had been a banker my whole life, but being a banker, starting a bank, very, very different thing. So anyway, later that week, unfortunately, George Harris from Citrus and Chemical Bank, who was their CEO, and it was a family-owned bank, and unfortunately, he passed away suddenly of a heart attack. And that sort of just changed the dynamic in my head. I said, now there's a chance that CNC won't be here, and maybe there's an opportunity for another bank to show up in town. And so we called David back and got a small group of investors together and decided to launch the bank. So didn't really know anything about starting a bank. It was a very interesting journey. We started the project in March of 2006, and we opened March of 2007. But if you can just imagine, I mean, literally we had no name.
Yeah.
We didn't have any operating systems. We didn't have space. We didn't have anything. So it truly, my dad owned his own company. So I came from a family of somebody who, kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit. But for me to have the opportunity to start a bank was something I never would have dreamed of. And it has absolutely been the biggest blessing of my professional life without question.
Yes.
Just the opportunity to grow something from scratch has been really cool.
That's honestly just very inspiring. And the fact, we were talking off air, you had to create a whole brand. So
Right.
like, insert Danielle, right?
Yep.
Your marketing director. I'm not sure when did she start, and let's talk a little bit about your transition to creating the brand, and then now to where you're at today when it comes to the marketing and just the branding of the bank.
Yeah. So if you go back to the very beginning, I mean, we didn't have a marketing department. So, we were very typical. I mean, the one question I get all the time is, well, you're starting a bank, so you must have had all this staff and you must have had all these departments. Because when you think of a bank, or you have people that are going to come to work for you from another bank, I mean, you have big HR departments and you have marketing departments and compliance areas and all that. Well, when we opened the bank, we had 9 employees. So you wore a lot of hats. And we really defined our culture by the experience of each client. And so we, a couple of really interesting stories about that. So we had, when you're starting a company from scratch, you're bringing in talent from all different places. And, after a couple of years, we found that a lot of our employees would say, well, that's not the way we did it at this bank, or that's not the way we did it at that bank. And so eventually I called a meeting for all the staff, and we sort of had that ceremonial throw your old business card in the fire kind of thing, where you just say, you don't work there anymore. You work at Bank of Central Florida now, and you really need to buy into what we're going to do.
A little different.
Exactly. And how we approach our client, how we do things. And so really the brand early on was all about the people that we hired and our ability to deliver a specific level of client experience that allowed people to feel comfortable with where they were banking. Fast forward about a decade or so, we brought Danielle on about 3.5 years ago, and she has totally changed the way that we approach it. I say that back then, we used to literally go out, beat people over the head and just drag them back to the bank. Now we actually have people call us. And some of that is because the scale of the bank, and obviously we've been around a little while now, but really most of the credit for that goes back to Danielle and the way that she now has created consistency in our brand, consistency in our approach, and really got us into places that we never would have dreamed to be. So she's done a phenomenal job, and very, very happy that we brought her on board. We've actually now have a second person in that area. And so we're beginning to, kind of put things in place that allow us to be a lot more digitally focused. In the old days, it was about sponsorships, and we still do a ton of sponsorships because that's who we are as a bank from a culture standpoint. But in the old days, that's how we got our name out there. Now we actually have a legitimate way for people to know who we are.
Right.
So
Yeah.
It's a much different experience.
Right. Yeah. The communication has changed. So now you have the ability to really attract people through your brand and through your stories. And as you're talking, I think and as a marketer, it's like, really your brand is through the storytelling and the experiences that you're giving your
Absolutely.
clients. How do you tell those stories to more people that they can relate to want to bank with you guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that we do a much better job now of letting our clients tell our story for us. In the old days, you would expect for me to come and tell you how great we are, and you really ought to come bank with us. Who wouldn't expect the CEO of the bank to do that? But when you have people in the community that are respected and that have actually experienced our service level and the way that we approach our business, and they're willing to say that publicly and really refer people to us. I mean, that to me is the biggest compliment any company can get, is if one of your existing clients refers a piece of business to you, there is no higher compliment. They can tell you you're great or whatever, but when they're willing to put their reputation on the line to help you support or help you grow your company, it's as good as it gets.
So Paul, talk a little bit about, for business owners that are watching and listening, if you don't have a marketing department, if you don't, kind of know where to go with the marketing, what's like the core foundation to start a business to have success? How did you do it? What's your words of wisdom for someone starting and then actually sustaining that over time too within the company?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, for me, it was about making sure that we were building relationships all across the community. So the way that we did that early on was a couple fold. One, we were at everything. So we, not only myself, but some of our team spent a lot of time at a lot of community events, making sure that we were letting people know that we were there and just building relationships with the people that we would see at those events. And so, quite honestly, I did that all the way back in my SunTrust days. So very, very fortunate that by the time we started Bank of Central Florida, I'd already been in the market for almost 10 years and really had built a lot of those relationships. But I think if you're starting a new company, being out among your clients and meeting them in places where it's not just their office, making sure that you are have the opportunity to be in a social environment with them and those type things is important. The second piece that we did is we really focused on sponsorship. So we found places in the community that had needs, and we wanted to make sure that the community knew that we were going to support those organizations. So there's a couple things that we've done over the years that I think are a little bit unique. And again, from the very beginning, we would sponsor events or make donations to people that we knew that were in need. One of the things that we do is each December we give our employees a certain amount of money to make a donation to an organization that's important to them.
That's so cool.
It's one thing for the bank to make a decision to do it, and we're going to give to United Way,
right,
which we're very blessed. Our employees support that. It's one of the things we do. But I always felt like it was important for their company to support things that were important to them. And it's always interesting to me to look at those employees and see who supports what, and then have me have the opportunity to go down and say, you're supporting this particular organization. Tell me the story, because there's a reason.
Absolutely.
There's a passion there, whether it's for, dogs and cats, or whether it's a cancer or heart association, whatever it is, they have a reason. But I just have always felt like it's the company's obligation to be able to support what's important to our employees. So as we built our culture over time, I think our employees really appreciate the fact that we care about them, but we care about what's important to them too. And we're going to try to help them. But, going back to where I started, I think the biggest thing is, if you don't have a big marketing department, you are the marketing department. If you're the person that owns that company, you're the one that's got to make it happen. You've got to be able to be out with your clients, whether those are community events or dinners or whatever it is. I joke that the year that we opened the bank in 2007, I also chaired the chamber that year. And after that year was over, I had to reintroduce myself to my wife and my kids because that was a rough year in terms of just being out, trying to represent the chamber and the business community, but also trying to get the bank up and running. So that's probably a lot of hard work. There's no other way to do it but shoe leather and time, and you have to invest that if you want to grow your business.
Well, yeah, especially, you guys are a community bank, right? So, the fact that you're embedded in the community is a staple for your success, and it shows with what you contribute and your passions for it. So.
Yeah, I think if you look at the support that we give to chambers, EDCs, but also just not-for-profits that are trying to support. Again, I mentioned United Way just a few minutes ago. We're very blessed that we have 100% participation from our employees in terms of giving to United Way. And the reason we do that, it's the one thing we ask them to do. And we tell them, hey, this is important to the company and we want it to be important to you. And we want our community to benefit from what we're doing. So yeah, the community aspect to banking is not only about doing it local, which we believe in, bank local, but it also means that you are supporting your community. You know, I had a mentor once tell me that if you build your community, you'll build your bank. And I think that's absolutely true. If you do well by the community will support you in return.
Yep, I cannot agree more. So, what would you say for someone who's watching or listening that maybe they're in an industry that is, you know, highly competitive, or one that they view as hard to tap into, like a banking industry, for example, or any industry, but they're struggling with like, I don't know how I can do that.
Yeah.
I don't see the pathway. It's too hard. How did you kind of maneuver through that, get over those mental hurdles, especially with, you know, a young family? Like,
yeah, I mean, my girls were 11 and 9 when we opened the bank. So,
yeah,
you know, when you go home and tell your wife, hey, I've decided to quit my job at SunTrust. Oh, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go work with Wesley for a little bit. We'll figure out something eventually. And then you come home one day and go, hey, we found it. We're going to start a bank from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, fortunately, I'm blessed with a great wife who, you know, said, you know, we can eat rice and beans if we have to, but we'll make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great question because, you know, for any entrepreneur, even successful entrepreneurs, if you're out there and you're thinking about doing something like this, you have to understand that all of us are scared. All of us have fears. There are huge challenges to starting a company or growing a company. So don't be intimidated by that. Let that fuel you and drive you. I remember a lot of times very early on in the bank, there would be things that would happen that were not going our way. And, you know, you have to look at that as an opportunity, to learn and figure out and kind of retool what you're doing to make sure that you are delivering to your clients what they need. But secondly, you really have to take that as an opportunity to just kind of refortify yourself and say, I am going to make this happen. And, you know, almost have to have daily affirmations. You wake up in the morning, you just got to tell yourself, no matter what I face today, I'm going to make it happen. And, you know, our situation was a little bit different than a lot of young companies in that when we opened the bank, we raised about $23.5 million in capital. So we had capital, and so many young entrepreneurs, their biggest challenge is they don't have capital. Great ideas, lots of energy, lots of passion. But when it comes to the capital side, that's where they struggle. In our particular case, that wasn't an issue. I didn't have to worry about making the first payroll. I didn't have to worry about paying a light bill. We kind of had that stuff taken care of. But that process of raising capital was another thing that I'd never.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Like, obviously, banks. I'm not too familiar with how that is even created or formulated. But for anyone, like, what's advice that you can share for people looking to raise capital just in general? Because I think that's really
it was probably one of the most interesting things that we had to do. So, you know, the way the banking business works, it's a very regulated industry, and you have to carry a certain level of capital based on how many assets you have. So there's ratios that you have to live within. So the way that the regulators look at it is they want you to estimate how big your bank will be 3 years from now, and you have to raise enough capital on day one to be able to support the bank 3 years from now. So that process for us was what they call a friends and family raise. So we hired an attorney, put together a prospectus, and our board at that time, there were 12 of us, each threw in some cash ourselves. I don't remember exactly of the original 23 million. I think the original board probably raised about 5.5 or 6 million. So the one thing
amazing.
It is amazing that we had people that willing to support. But I will tell you, because I did a lot of the raise, well, the whole board did the raise, but I kind of managed that process. And virtually without exception, everybody wanted to know, well, how much did the board put in? Or how much did you personally put in, Paul? They want to know that, because if they're going to invest in your company, they want to make sure that you're
invested in it.
Yeah, exactly. So that process was interesting. We started the raise in the middle of November of 2006, and we finished it first week in January. So it only took us about 10 weeks to raise 23 million. And actually at the end of as we were coming to the end of the raise, we sent checks back because we had raised more. That we had started out to raise 15 million. And by the time we got to 23.5, we just had to shut it off. So again, it's a very interesting process. It's a little bit different than, some of your listeners out there may be going, well, there's no way I need $23 million to start my company. But the concepts are the same.
Exactly.
You've got to be willing to put your own skin in the game, and whoever it is that's going to buy stock or provide angel financing or whatever, they're going to want to know that you are invested both not only emotionally but financially.
And you had a core group of like-minded people. So I think that's another big point is think of your circle and who's passionate about whatever you are creating too. How can you align together? And the more energy you can put in one room together, usually better, bigger ideas come from that. So
no question. I think we originally had about 175 shareholders. And so and almost all of that got raised here in Polk County. And the reason that we did that was, it creates almost an immediate client base for you. So
absolutely.
A lot easier for me to go back to somebody and say, hey, you're a shareholder of the bank.
You're a founding member.
You need to come bank with us. You know, if you're still hanging out at Bank America, that's probably not a good thing for us. So it definitely helped. But that part for me was probably the most intimidating part. The banking part I knew for the most part, not all of it. But capital raising, buying health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I when I go out and meet with clients and prospects now, I tell them one of the unique things about our bank is that I know what they're doing. I know what those entrepreneurs are having to go through. I know the decisions that they're going to have to make because I did it 15 years ago, no differently than they're doing it today. And that resonates with people. They know the struggles and they know that I know them because I lived them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what would you say, Paul, like as far as, what you are doing for business owners here, like, what are some opportunities or resources that Bank of Central Florida offers, or just like, why should business owners here bank with you guys over, a larger corporation or national bank or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's really three things I think that sets us apart. Number one, and it's somewhat cliche, but really it's about our people. I mean, we hire experienced bankers. These are people that have been in Polk County for a long time. They know the lay of the land. I mean, we now have expanded over to Tampa, and we didn't send bankers from Polk County over to Tampa. We hired people from Tampa who live and work in that community. So our people, without question, is the number one thing. The second thing is we have really good technology. So when we open the bank, it's kind of a funny story. I'll ask you this question. So what do you think is older, the iPhone or Bank of Central Florida? So Bank of Central Florida started in March of 2007. So is the iPhone older than us or younger than us?
2007. I'd say younger.
So the iPhone came out in September of 2007.
Really?
And we came out in March of 2007.
No way.
So when I wrote the original business plan for the regulators and for the people that we were going to raise money from, there was no mention of mobile banking.
Wow. Yes.
Because when we were started our bank in March, there was no such thing as an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no such thing as mobile banking. There were no apps.
Right.
None of that existed. So if you can imagine having to pivot from where we were to where we had to go in literally the first year that we were open. So my point to that is we have always had really good technology because we grew up in the technology age. We did not have legacy systems that really had trouble adapting to technology.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And so we started in this age, and so that's helped us. So we have good technology. I think that's important for all of our clients, in particular entrepreneurs who they want to bank when they bank, and they need to be able to interact with the bank, not during normal business hours, because that's when they're running their business.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think those are the two main drivers that we have. But I think the other thing too is, I think the ability to sit down with decision makers. I know a lot of our clients like the fact that they can sit down with me and have a direct conversation about, hey, this is a project that I'm working on. Can you guys help me? And they know that if I say yes, that it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So many times you have clients who bank at one of the larger banks, and they deal with their account officer, and he says, oh, yeah, I think we can get that done. But when it goes up the line, it doesn't happen. Right. And they don't really feel like they can pitch the person that has the decision-making authority. And I'm not the only one over there making loan decisions. Sure. We have plenty of our team that does that, but they just like the fact that they can sit across the table from the person who has enough ink in the pen to be able to get a deal done.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to open a company or you're trying to run a company, you have a million decisions you have to make on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So if you can take your banking and know that you've got a solid partner there and you kind of take that off the table, it lets you focus on some things, quite honestly, that you'd rather spend your time on.
Cannot agree more. And you've literally started a business too. So you can relate to business owners here to another level also. Not someone who's, been with the same organization, worked their way up, and that's all you sleep, breathe, and eat, right? Like you have a very unique perspective, which I can really relate to some degree, not the banking part, but starting something.
It's a good point. I mean, it's interesting because, some of our employees, when we bring people in from big banks, there's two things that generally happen. One, we need to get them to decompress, because when you're at a big bank, it's all about daily. Did you do this? And we don't manage our people that way. We have a core value called self-management. So we tell you what it is that you need to do and how we need you to do it. And then we expect you to do it. So we're not going to check on you every day. So, from that perspective, they come into our organization and they love the fact that they have some autonomy and they have the ability to make decisions and manage kind of their own daily work. So that's a big deal for people that are coming from big organizations. But the other thing, and one of our bankers is Randy Holland. I'm sure a lot of your folks will know Randy. He's been with our bank since the very beginning. But one of the things that he always says is, the one thing in our bank, if you're going to bring up a problem, you better have a solution to follow it, because, it's really easy in big companies to say, this isn't working or somebody needs to take care of that. And then, you look around and they kick it to wherever and somebody from facilities shows up. Well, in our bank, if something's not working, chances are I'm going to be, or somebody on my team is going to be the one fixing it. We don't have, we are a small business. We have 86 employees. So we are not SunTrust. We're not Bank of America. We are a small business, very similar to a lot of the folks that are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say was the hardest part, like getting into the market? Was it marketing, like getting people to know about you guys, or what was the hardest part? Because obviously when you started the bank too, like the whole market, the crash was the next year too. So, right. So you had the revolutionary with mobile, then the market. So you had to go through a lot just your first few years.
Yeah. It wasn't for the faint of heart. I mean, there's definitely some sleepless nights. I think that, in some ways the financial crisis, back in 2008, 9, and 10 kind of helped us. And the reason I say that is we didn't really have bad loans on our books. So we sort of had missed all of the opportunities to make bad loans. And what I used to ask people all the time back then was, when was the last time you heard from your banker? Because if you had a company that was doing well, you didn't hear from your banker, because your banker was very, very busy trying to collect bad loans. He was working out of a lot of different deals. So, we were able to grow the bank relatively quickly. That existing shareholder base certainly helped us. But I think probably the biggest challenge that we faced early on and is what we call the PITA factor, the pain in the butt factor. Because people, if they're at a bank, they just think, wow, it's going to be too hard to switch. I have all of these online payments. I've got all of this stuff.
Auto pay,
and I just don't want to deal with all of it. And, I tell people all the time, if you're unhappy where you're banking, and the only reason you're staying is because you think it's going to be hard to switch, think how much better it would be if you took the hour and a half it would take to switch those things over. And in most cases, we do it for you. But how much better your life would be going forward. So instead of being frustrated or spending 30 minutes on the phone trying to get something solved, that you actually had a bank that would respond to your need. And so I've been able to convince a few people over the years that it was worth the challenge. But that probably early on was the biggest thing, that and just being new. You know, I mean, people were like, I don't know how long this bank's going to be around. And it's very gratifying to look back 15 years later and now be over $1 billion in assets and really having grown the bank into a multi county bank in the middle of Central Florida. So it's been fun, but those early years was definitely a little bit of a challenge for sure. But that's true of everybody out there that's ever started a business.
Yep. I mean, you learn, that's part of the growing pains, right? You have to learn and adapt, pivot. But one thing that stayed true, it really sounds like, is the culture that you guys have started with, and now it still is continuing. So for like leaders that are listening, maybe they're not a business owner even, but just like a middle management or executive, what are some of the top traits that you look in, you look for leaders, or you see the most that have success? Like, what are those key things?
I think probably the biggest thing is the servant's heart. I mean, in our organization, if you don't love to serve our clients and our fellow employees, that you're just not going to last very long. It's key to who I am as a person. I mean, we believe in supporting our community, supporting our clients, supporting each other. So that's really important. So when we hire people, I want people that have a servant's heart. I think the other thing is that they have to be entrepreneurial. And I think that word scares a lot of people. And I tell our bankers that being entrepreneurial doesn't mean that you went out and started a bank.
Mm-hmm.
Being entrepreneurial means that you are able to identify issues and find solutions for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it's about. And in our company, that's valued because our clients bring us problems. I mean, that's why they call us. I mean, if everything's perfect, we don't hear from them. So when they call us, they're looking at a situation that they're not familiar with or that they're having trouble with, and they expect us to be entrepreneurial enough to figure out how to fix it and give them a solution. That's what we're there to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that trait for anybody in any company, all the way down to our new accounts people, our tellers, all the way up through our executive management team, I need them to look at every day and say, what is coming my way and how do I have the ability to impact it in a positive way and solve a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And we make mistakes. I mean, we're not a mistake. It happens all the time. The difference in our bank is when we do make a mistake or we recognize that a client has an issue, it is all hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
We will worry after the fact about why did it happen or who did what or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I tell our folks, our clients don't care that something happened. Our clients care, did we fix their problem?
Yep. I've read a quote recently. It's like customers or clients don't care about the labor pain. They want the baby delivered.
Exactly.
They don't care what happens in the back, right?
Yeah, and they shouldn't see it. I mean, what they should see is, okay, Tyler, you got a problem. Let me see how I can solve it. I'll get back to you within an hour.
Yeah.
And you call them back with a solution in an hour, then they're like, I mean, quite honestly, we probably have made more progress with our clients when they had a problem because of the way we deal with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Than it is that we created a problem, because they appreciate, and most business owners or everybody understands that things don't always go perfectly. And certainly we have clients that get frustrated with us. And I tell them all the time, you can get frustrated with us. Just give us a chance to solve your problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if at the end of the day, we haven't solved your problem and that's creating an issue, then I will step in and lead through it. But most of our clients get taken care of, and our people, again, they love to serve people.
Yeah. One thing you said there, and we actually interviewed Justin Heacock, who's the expert in entrepreneur at Florida Southern.
Yep.
He had a word that I thought was really cool. It's intrapreneur. So it's someone who I think has those entrepreneur traits, but they don't have like that extra level of like actually doing it. Or I think it's kind of what you were alluding to.
No, it's exactly. I mean, I want our people to be entrepreneurial, but again, you don't have to start a company or you don't have to come up with the next great idea.
It's traits.
It's traits. Yeah. It's looking at problems and finding solutions. And early on when we started the bank, that's what I did. I mean, every single day was about identifying what wasn't working and figuring out how are we going to solve it. Mm-hmm. And, and as we built our culture over the years, the really great thing for me now is the culture is now taking care of itself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have integrated almost 40 people into our culture in the last 2.5 years. So we had about 50 people. Now we have about 90 people. When you bring that many new people in, I can't, and I do sit down with all of our new employees as part of their orientation, but I can't be next to them every day like it was 15 years ago when there was only 9 of us and I could pretty much see everybody and what was going on every day. Now we have our employees are teaching our new employees about how we do things and how we approach things. And it's always interesting to me when we have situations now where a group of employees may come and say, Susie doesn't fit. as opposed to us as management having to figure out that. Now they say, she doesn't have a servant's heart, or she's not entrepreneurial. She looks to push somebody else to solve something. And so when you can actually get the culture to maintain itself, that is, from a leadership perspective, that's as good as it gets.
That's amazing. So as we wrap up, a couple like personal questions that I want to ask, like, what do you see, like, what would you, Paul, want your legacy to be within Bank of Central Florida, with like the team, the employees, but also like here in Lakeland? Like, what do you want to be known for when it's all said and done here?
Well, first off, Bank of Central Florida is what I do. It's not who I am. And so I learned that a long time ago, that the things that are important to me are my family, my faith. Those are the things that drive me every day. Bank of Central Florida has been a huge blessing in my life and in my family's life. It has afforded us lots of great opportunities. But for me, the most important thing are the 84 employees whose lives we impact. I mean, I love the fact that when we drive around town and I see projects that we financed or companies that we've taken care of, I love that. But what I really love are the people that are taking care of those clients, and the way that our company cares about them and tries to make sure that we're being a good employer. We care about what's going on in their life. We care about what's happening with their family. And so those things are to me the most important thing. I always tell our folks that if we do a really good job with each other and finding the right people, our clients are going to get taken care of. We don't have to do anything unique. We just need to get the right people together and then show them how it is that we like to do it. So, in terms of Lynn and I's legacy in Lakeland, I mean, we've been here now for 25 years, been involved in a lot of different projects, over those years, and have tried to do our part. But for me, that was about giving back to a community that has given so much to me. I never in my wildest dreams, if I'd have stayed, I moved here from Orlando when I was with SunTrust. Had I never moved here, there's no way I would have ever started a bank in Orlando. It would never have happened. So this community has been unbelievable to me and Lynn and our girls. And so anything that we've given back to them is small in comparison to what we've received.
So that's so beautiful. So, and then where do you see the future of BOCF? I almost messed that up.
Yeah, you're good. As we look forward and back in 2020, at our board retreat, we talked about sort of what is the next 5 years hold for us. I'm a big strategic planner, but I don't think you can get out much more than about 5 years. There's too many things that are unpredictable, such as a pandemic, maybe, that came along out of nowhere. But, for us, back in 2020, we said that our goal was to build a franchise that included both Tampa and Orlando, but then really had the middle covered as well. So there's a lot of banks that come in from out of state or that are in Tampa, and they want to be in Orlando, and they jump straight across Polk. They don't see Polk and they don't see Lakeland as a piece to the strategy because they just want to be in the big metro markets. We actually took the opposite approach. We built about $1 billion bank in Polk, and now we're trying to augment that in metro markets, Tampa and Orlando. So if I look forward over the next 3 or 4 years, I think we are up and running in Tampa now. We have a full team over there. We'll have our first retail office open later this summer, and then we've purchased some property to build another retail office over there in South Tampa.
Exciting.
Yeah, it is very exciting. So we'll be in Tampa for sure, and we're already in Plant City, Lakeland, Winter Haven. And I think this time next year, we'll be trying to execute a strategy in Orlando. We have a loan production office over there and one of our SBA lenders there. So we've begun to kind of get that market, feel that market out a little bit. But as I look forward, our goal would be to have $1.5 billion, $2 billion bank that includes both Tampa and Orlando, with Polk really being the center of that. And we think that strategy over time will be very successful. I mean, if you gave me the entire map of the United States and said, "Hey, Paul, where would you like to start a bank?" I'm not sure there's anywhere I would pick other than where we happen to be sitting.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, from an economic perspective, this I-4 corridor and those two metro markets are as good as it gets from anywhere in the country.
Right. I'd argue that we're almost on the cusp of forming a triad here.
Yeah.
Like maybe in 10 years, Lakeland is now, a big enough city where it's a triad. Lakeland, Lakeland, Orlando, Tampa.
Well, I've done a lot of work with the chamber over the years, and one of the things that we have always talked about is we want Lakeland to have its own identity. We don't want to become a bedroom community of a bunch of strip centers and a bunch of housing developments that just send people to Tampa or Orlando every day for work. And so a lot of great work been done in this community by the LEDC, the chamber, others to make sure that didn't happen. And now I think we do have our own identity. And I think we have created certain niches and spaces. We're more than just an ag county. We're more than a phosphate company. We're more than just a distribution hub. We are still all of those things, but we also have high tech corridors. I mean, we're sitting in the Catapult building. Who would have ever thought when I moved here 25 years ago that we'd have a 4-story incubator that allows companies and entrepreneurs to start from scratch. So it's changed dramatically in terms of who we are and what we do as a community. And that's super, super exciting. And so lay that, and then you get to put a bank in the middle of it and try to grow one. It doesn't get a lot better than that. That's
so awesome. Well, Paul, I appreciate you so much. I'm a huge fan of you and what you guys are doing at the bank. Honestly, I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I mean, you guys have really big plans, and just the city is growing so fast. But the impact you're making on the lives of others, I think, is what really should resonate with the viewers. Is just, that's how everything sustains and grows. It trickles from the leadership down to the leaders that are day to day. That affects your clients. It affects everything else from there. So
yeah, well, those are really kind words. I appreciate it. This has been fun. Been a blast to be with you. I enjoyed it. Our bank is committed to this community. We've been here for a long time. We'll continue to be here for a lot longer. And I also look forward to seeing where the journey takes.
Sir,
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next week.